Yo, Kilohertz just released a new sidechain plugin called Compactor, and I thought I should explain what it does because I feel like I'm weirdly uniquely qualified to do this because I've spent a lot of time basically designing this kind of effect. So Compactor is a kind of compressor. It's a sidechain compressor at its core, but it's designed in a very specific way to be really optimized for sidechains. So what we're going to do is we're going to get an FX layer here. And we're going to get two different test zones that we're going to kind of use to visualize what this does and also to hear what this does. So to hear what this does, we're going to use a test zone. And to visualize what this does, we're going to use a DC offset because we're going to be able to see exactly what it does to your bass. So we're going to use an oscilloscope here. And we have this kick drum. So what we're going to do is we're going to take Compactor on our bass here, which is just going to be our test tone. So let's just set this to full gain. I'm going to set this to 100 Hertz. It's going to be relatively low in frequency, so you won't be listening to headphones to this on headphones or good speakers or something, just because on bass it's best to hear the distortion artifacts I find when testing sidechain compressors. So we have this bass here. I'm going to set this to sidechain mode and get the input of our kick drum. Let's call this kick drum. And basically what Compactor does, it does Ringmod Sidechain with some modifications. So if we have this all the way down, it's basically going to Ringmod Sidechain your bass to your kick. What is Ringmod Sidechain? Ringmod Sidechain means sidechain very, very fast. So sidechain following each individual curve of the kick drum. So if we just play this right now, set this input here to sidechain, and have this sound coming in, you can see it basically cuts this kick shape out of our bass. And if we listen to the two together and kind of, let's maybe bring down the master gain a little bit. Yeah, let's just remove this mix bus here. And maybe turn these channels down a bit. So we can kind of see on the millimeters oscilloscope, if we add these two channels together and don't have Compactor on them, they're going to kind of add together and create much higher peaks, while with Compactor, because the bass is being ducked when the kick happens, you can see they stay the same volume, so this is really good for optimizing loudness. And right now, once again, we have this at 0, 0, 0, so this is Ringmod Sidechain in peak mode. And if we visualize what this does to our bass, or let's maybe listen to it with the bass. We can kind of hear it distorting the bass a bit because it's moving very quickly. So to visualize what this does to our bass, we're going to use a DC offset, because this is going to let us see exactly the kind of envelope that it cuts out of our bass here. So if we just zoom in a little bit, this is what it does to our bass. It just turns it down using this shape, which is exactly, if we just get the kick drum here and the second input, exactly following our kick drum. It's not following this sort of shape, it's following every single bump here. And then attack, hold, and release are all different ways to kind of smooth this shape out to reduce the distortion. So if we use hold, you can see how it holds these moments when it kind of moves down a little bit, how it holds them for a little bit longer here. So these get kind of flattened out and lengthened compared to this, you know? See, in the later bits, sort of these get flatter and longer. Same with release. It kind of, you can see here, basically this is a flat white shape because it's moving so quickly. And now you can kind of see, okay, it's moving quickly here, but it's creating more of a smooth ducking curve, and this just reduces distortion. So if we listen to this on our test tone, we're going to be able to hear as I turn up, attack, hold and release, basically the envelope gets a little bit lengthened, kind of stops that fast up and down movement, and that really helps us kind of make it a bit more transparent. You can hear how the distortion is gone. And once again, if we use the DC offset to visualize it, it basically, you know, turns this kind of shape here it creates this kind of ducking shape. Let's maybe just use play for this. I think that'll be a bit better, or maybe B. Yeah, B is better, I think. So you can see it just makes this ducking shape smoother and longer. And attack is kind of interesting because if we get 2 kicks in here, let me just find my 1 key. I have my keyboard, can't see my keyboard because my mic is in the way. But whatever. So if we have 2 kicks here, and just turn hold and release down, we're gonna see what attack does. It basically makes it react a bit early. So this plugin has a base latency of 10 milliseconds. Look at this chain here, you can see these 10 milliseconds added by this. So if we deactivate this, they're gone. 10.2 milliseconds, I guess. And basically these are there for the attack, because the attack is not like a compressor's attack, where it kind of makes this ducking shape go slower and happen later. It instead means attack kind of works backwards in time, so it makes the ducking happen early. So you can see here how it goes down immediately when the transient of the kick is. And as we turn up attack, you're going to be able to see how it goes down a little bit early. And this both helps smooth this shape, reduce distortion, and also kind of create a bit of a gap before this transient here, which kind of means the transient hits a bit more because it's not being masked by the bass as much. So if we turn up attack, you can see here how it kind of fades into this transient here, you know, and how the shape gets a bit smoother. So we can use these 3 to kind of get from pure Ringmod Sidechain to a very specifically smooth Ringmod Sidechain that's kind of ducking the minimal amount that's necessary, but still enough that it doesn't distort. So I would possibly set this up something like, I like having attack all the way up. I like the little gap here before my transients makes it hits harder. Hold pretty high as well. Something like this maybe. And then just using release to kind of get these small movements out here, but not having release too high, because then it's basically going to create pumping, where this ducking shape here is too long for our kick drum, and the kick drum can't fill in that gap, so we hear this kind of dip after the kick drum in the bass. So if we turn release up way too high, you can see how basically now you get this EDM pumping effect where the bass is dipped for way too long. So I like to keep release relatively low, but still kind of high enough where it just removes those fast movements, because once again, fast envelope movements that happen basically at audio rate are the same as sort of ring mode or amplitude modulation, which kind of are audible as distortion. So we can just bring it up a little bit to kind of get something more like this here. And this is a really nice, perfect ducking shape for our kick drum. Now, there's a couple more things to this plugin. So there's peak, ISP, and RMS. Basically, peak is just standard Ringmod Sidechain. ISP is very similar to peak. It stands for intersample peaks. It basically means it doesn't just look at every sample of the audio, but also at peaks that happen in between the samples. So it's basically like a true peak ducking. So it's kind of, I assume it's going to be oversampled or something. And that's kind of leads to it. It's if we basically, this is maybe, if you don't know digital audio, this might be a bit much, but basically if you have two samples here and here, and the sound is kind of sampled here at your sample rate, and then sometimes, because the curve is smoothed, it can go up to a higher value between 2 peaks. And intersample peak kind of takes into account this higher value. I hope that makes sense. It's not that important. I personally don't know if I would ever use this. But and then RMS is just root mean squared, so it's kind of averaged over time. So you're gonna see a kind of smoother ducking shape. That happens a bit late, kind of gets smoothed out a bit. I personally tend to prefer using peak and then doing the smoothing manually by bringing the hold up, bringing the attack up, and just introducing a tiny bit of release, like 5 milliseconds. And this way you kind of get this nice smooth ducking shape out of your bass, exactly following the envelope of your kick drum or your snare drum or whatever else you're using. And yeah, this is really nice because I've spent a lot of time, you know, designing these kind of things in the grid, and it was fun and all, but like, this is, if you compare this interface to this interface, I think there's a clear winner, and it's not me. because I can't code interfaces. So this basically does everything that kind of this my ducking patches that I've made videos about in the past do. The at least the Ringmod part. It doesn't do the ducking part. For that, you could just use something like duck together with this. So this basically use a pre-drawn envelope instead of an envelope follower. But yeah, really nice sort of ducking thing. Of course, in Bitwig, if you want to use this in multiband or in mid-side or whatever, you can. There's a stereo linking control, stereo all the way down. Both channels are processed the same, just by the maximum. And then if you bring it all the way up, basically left and right are processed separately. So this might mess a tiny bit with the stereo width, although it might not matter too much. Generally, I think if you have stereo all the way up, that might gain you a tiny bit of loudness. I personally have bigger problems. I think there's more important things than this tiny loudness gain, but whatever. Range kind of limits how far down it can go. See here. Kind of stops it going down too far. So it just kind of limits this. And then mix is a mix. I mean, mix is pretty obvious, I think. It just reduces basically the overall ducking thing. You can also just set like a threshold. So this is like a threshold for like a limiter or compressor. And yeah, once again, this is technically, I would say this is basically just a sidechain compressor. It's just a compressor specifically designed for sidechain, which is very rare. Because normally you've got compressors like dynamics. And if we just look at the shapes that this creates, so just get the kick drum here, put the threshold, See here, this creates a ducking shape too. Just attack and release. You can already see this is over compressing here. Not really designed for that. If we bring up release, it's gonna compress even longer. It's gonna start pumping. Attack in this case is not a look ahead attack like with the kilohertz thing, but it just basically makes this be late. You can see how it just doesn't duck for the transient, even though it should. So you could use like a time shift here, and then you could kind of push this around in time, and then all sorts of bullshit. But you could also just use Kilohertz Compactor, which is a free plugin that, by the way, I would have happily paid 20 euro for or whatever, because this is exactly my my wheelhouse, I guess. So yeah. I think that's all I have to say about this thing, really. I hope these examples kind of, let's maybe listen again to how basically you've got the pure Ringmod Sidechain, and then we bring up the release and the attack to kind of reduce distortion. So if we just listen to this test on here with a kick. You can hear sort of in the low mids and stuff that because the bass sound isn't being modulated as quickly anymore, but by a more smooth shape, we don't get these harmonics being introduced to it. That kind of happen when we have very fast compression. So that's Kilohertz Compactor. Very cool plugin, free plugin, great plugin. Exactly my cup of tea. I like this a lot, and I thought maybe this kind of visualization maybe could help you understand a bit more, get a bit more of a detailed perspective on what exactly is it doing. Yeah, this is my new go-to for sidechaining, from specifically like broadband sidechain. So hope that was interesting, useful, kind of helped you maybe get a better understanding of this. Cheers, bye.